Hello and welcome to the Empathy Podcast. This podcast seeks to explore the minds of those who not only understand or experience empathy, but of those who wish to take action, build and practice empathetic behavior through conscious decision and responsible lifestyle choices. So if that sounds like something you might be interested in, this podcast might be just for you. So sit back, relax, and use what you were born with, empathy. How's it going? Welcome to the podcast. I'm super excited to have another great guest. She comes from us all the way from New York. She's an astrologer, she's an author, and she's a yoga teacher, but also she's a huge advocate for the vegan lifestyle. And I'm so excited for her to share her story and everything about that because it's so powerful. She also has a podcast, the Modern Magic podcast, and that is where I had first discovered her and some of her interesting stories that she has on there, as well as her story about veganism. On top of that, TikTok. TikTok is something that has grown incredibly huge for a lot of people, and she's one of the ones that's riding the wave with that TikTok wave that's going strong. So before we jump right into the podcast and we get into everything, I have a couple quick questions that I have for you. So the first one I have for you is, why did you start a TikTok?
So I started, honestly, I was bored. I don't want to say bored because I'm not really someone who tends to let my time go to waste. But I remember hearing about TikTok when I was on a retreat in February, and I saw someone filming something, and so I immediately saw that someone was filming something, and I had never even looked into TikTok. I knew of people doing like dances, but I didn't really know of what I thought it was, for kids or whatever. I didn't really know. And so I saw this person trying to film a TikTok on this trail hike on this retreat. And they were like, there's not really an astrology presence, or there is, but the accounts don't tend to be like that serious, and you could be good on there. And I was like, oh, okay. Like in the back of my mind, I just thought, okay, that's cool. And so once my school went on lockdown and I was able to honestly, I'm a dedicated student, but once I could be on my phone during class, I was like, oh, I might as well download TikTok. And I did. And all of a sudden I uploaded my second day, just this really stupid joke, why I hate your zodiac sign video. And that blew up, and it blew up because it offended so many 12-year-olds that couldn't understand sarcasm, that I have over 30,000 comments of people really upset. And so that basically propelled me into where I am today. And it was kind of an accident of having free time and the perfect storm of there not being that kind of a presence yet. And there is astrology, but I still make joke astrology videos, but there is a market to be filled. So that's how that began.
Wow, that's super cool. Yeah, I had seen, I was following this guy. He's in New York as well. You're in New York, and he's always talking about TikTok just all the time. You probably heard of him, Gary Vee. Yeah. So he was always talking about it, and I had followed him and really liked his content, and he inspired me to start my podcast and a lot of other things that I did because of his enthusiasm and his logic behind why you should start some of these things. He's like, you should start this because X, Y, and Z. And it's just that makes sense. Yeah, I probably should do that. And so I ended up doing the TikTok. And it didn't start out good because I was living in another country, and it's based on the geographic. Right. And so the country I was living in was in Kuwait at the time. I was working over there. And it's I was spreading veganism content. And so it was just they don't even know what that word means, let alone caring about animals. That's way beyond. And I'm talking about they literally will kick cats that are next to them because they don't like cats. So that's literally what happens sometimes. And so anyway, so I was just I started there, and it was dead and nothing. Yeah. And I was like, whatever, I put it off for 6 more months. I didn't really do anything. And then I came back to Los Angeles and San Diego and Southern California, and I started doing it again and started having some success. And I think one went super viral. I think it was over 800,000 views. And that was great for me, by anything that I've ever had. Yeah. And then, but then that one got deleted and banned because it had a tiny bit like it wasn't intentional. It was like kind of like on the TV screen, and in the background had a little bit of animal slaughter of a chicken being killed.
Yeah,
And
I've had videos taken down that I do edit a PETA video in support, and somehow mine was taken down, but theirs wasn't, where it showed the dairy industry. I'm like, if you have to take this down, yeah,
yeah,
obviously.
and so those are always like a little bit frustrating, you know, when you have something like that big. But yeah, so it's just a huge way to communicate, a great way to reach out to people.
Yeah.
And it isn't just dancing. It isn't just lip syncing. It isn't just, yes, it is those things, but it's anything you want. Like you love astrology, talk about astrology. You love yoga, do that. You love dancing, do that. Whatever you love, just share it, and if you're good, like people will find you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, for sure. And it's not limited. So it's not like in the niche, like your niche will be thrown everywhere. You know, like you'll see things like that. You're like, I didn't even care about this before, but all of a sudden now I really do. And so
That's
it's just
why
really different.
I have copy and paste responses to people who ask really basic questions, because I know that for the first time in my life, like I'm being thrown to people that would not have found me otherwise. And so for one, it meant that I just had to get a tougher skin really, really quickly, because astrology, to someone who just literally assumes that it's the pop culture version, notably, they're going to be like, do you have an IQ of 25? Because it is the gold standard of superstition. So, and there's no way for me to teach like a Platonic theory class or something so I have had to be really liberal with blocking and just understand that. But with that has come like reaching so many more people. And so it has been that like that adjustment of the kind of platform it is, where it is a free-for-all, and that's really great and really egalitarian. And that comes with also having to be like, I mean, I'm sure you get it too with the carnist insanity, the absolute insanity. That's because I had one blow up recently about actually the dairy industry, where I responded to a comment. I don't know if you saw it. I responded to a comment. Yeah, someone was like, cows want to be milked. And so I talked through the industry, and it was the first one that blew up with hundreds of comments being like, oh my God, I found vegan TikTok, let me stay. I was like, finally the algorithm worked. And so even though that it did attract a few people that were hurtful or being like, I'm eating this as I eat whatever, that was the first one where I really felt that I had landed in the right algorithm, because so many people were so supportive, and I was amazed. I was amazed at that.
Yeah, I totally agree 100%. That's super cool. And I mean, that maybe was the way that I found you through that algorithm style, because I had started accumulating a lot of different, in the beginning, I was trying to learn like what works, what doesn't work, you know, kind of learning from other people until I kind of fit into my own groove, which is kind of how I did it with Instagram, how I did it with Facebook or whatever, like kind of like learning from others, and then saying, no, this is me, this is now mine, and like who I am from kind of other people's influence. So yeah, so the next question that I want to jump right into, speaking about what you were talking about, is what inspired you to start astrology? Because that is really fascinating.
Yeah, so weirdly enough, I actually found astrology like as soon as I started reading, and I started reading really, really early on. So it was like a running joke in my family that I read before I walked, because I was just always like staring at words. And then when I was 2, my parents started giving me newspaper comics, because I would like point out the words and say things. And apparently from the get-go, I didn't want to look at the picture comics, but instead I looked to what was next to them, which were the horoscopes. And I didn't know what I was reading for like years, but the words stuck with me. And I grew up with the internet. So by the time I was 6, just looking up those words led to me finding my like natal chart, and basically starting an endless study where I was lucky enough to be able to research it to an extent that most people my age hadn't been before, and also to an extent that because I wasn't an only child, but my parents were older, my siblings were older, and my other sibling was much younger. I had so much time to myself that it really became a tool for finding myself. And then that exploration became just, it's all I would think about or talk about. And even I didn't know that you could be a professional astrologer. I thought you had to be like born into a Wiccan family or do something different. I thought, this is my hobby, but it didn't even enter my brain as a career. I grew up thinking I was going to be an actor until I basically was in high school and I was doing readings for people for like, basically they would they would just pay me at parties or whatever, and I would give readings. And as I found out that I really loved philosophy, it went in very, very well with the kind of astrology that I practice, which is very much more like world themes. And that's part of the reason why I'm not taking clients right now, is because my passions really lie in world research. And it was like the perfect storm of growing up with it and having the ability to always spend time researching, and my innate like for the esoteric subjects.
Oh, it's super cool. Awesome. Yeah, I love it. And I'm learning a lot of that stuff from you. You're probably the first person that I've seen that has any kind of passion in that like, well, also is vegan as well.
Right.
That is something that I would definitely be like watching that content and learning more from. Yeah. So my next question, you spoke on a little bit about getting thick skin really, really quick, which is something that people are experiencing a lot right now. It's one of the topics that, man, I feel like I get comments all the time. How do you deal with this? How do you deal with this? Hey, I'm struggling with this. Or what is worse to me, honestly, what's worse than the ones that come to me, because that's the best scenario. You know, maybe I can help you. You know what I mean? Or going to someone that can maybe help you. The worst scenario is somebody that is quiet about this topic. Okay, someone that just doesn't say anything and holds it inside and maybe just goes away and just continues their life, and they don't help animals anymore for whatever reason. And that's hate. People getting online hate and cyberbullying. How do you deal with that? Because that's a very challenging one.
Yeah, it's been something very, very new to deal with, because like I said, I didn't have really any online presence until about 3 months ago, when I blew up on TikTok, and then kind of years of having a lot of content came in handy, because people very quickly realized that there was like so much that it just accumulated very quickly. And at first with like the kids, it didn't feel like anything. It was like, they're so young, I'm just gonna block. I blocked hundreds of people a day, and I knew that I just had to. It was like, I can't explain it to you guys. I know that I can't help it, so I just blocked them, just for both of our sake. And the more that I did grow, I had to I have a one strike block policy, and I think that I don't respond to hate unless I can make a teaching point out of it. And that's what the game changer was for me, was, does my energy need to be spent refuting all of these people, or can I just block? Because if I block them, their comment is still up, so someone else will deal with it, I'm sure. It's not like my energy to do that. And I think that with thicker skin, it doesn't necessarily mean that I don't feel anything or that I don't take comments to heart, but rather that I know to place boundaries around even considering it and just placing it off. Because the worst ones are on my vegan videos, because those tend to be like very, very personal and very ad hominem. Like, I wouldn't believe someone that studies astrology. Like, that's the kind of logic you're coming in with, and things that if you let hang on to you will be very, very detrimental. And that actually has been something that, as amazing things have happened, it probably has been one of the most crisis-ridden times, just because of the influx of energy like that I thought I would be easily dealing with. But I don't think you know what it feels like to have so many eyes on you with that pressure until it actually happens. Because I used to not understand why people had to take social media breaks. I was like, what? Like, that's not anything. Like, I don't understand that. Like, that's an outlet. But now I really do understand the boundaries. And I think part of it is exposure therapy, to be honest, because there comes a point where you say, I'm not going to stop making this, so I might as well completely put a boundary around dealing with it. And I also agree that the real issue are people who actually either aren't triggered or stop because they don't want to put out that. Because I would rather someone get angry and triggered and be at that breaking point so that they can have the remorse or the big breakthrough, than someone who is always like, I'm not even going to think about it. I'm not going to say anything. Either like, I'm not going to do anything. That I would rather have some carnage, like extreme anger, or someone asking me questions and things like that, than someone who scrolls by because they can't even articulate how much cognitive dissonance they have. Even if it's idiotic, I would rather have the word vomit than not. So I see it every time as like, ooh, they got their trigger out. Like, good. There's some, like, I'm catalyzing the change. And I just remember that content online is not directly me. It's like a creation of mine, so that I don't have to identify personally with either the 12-year-olds not understanding or the carnists finding what I've created.
Yeah, and I always say that someone that's a hater or someone that's a troll or someone that's totally against whatever you're standing for, I always say that they have one true goal in mind. Like, what do they really, really want from you?
Yeah.
And this is the one goal that I think that they have. They want you to shut up. That's it. What they really, really want is you to stop putting information into their mind that is conflicting with what they already believe, and they want that to end, period. So what will they do to make that happen? That's the question. Everybody has a different idea of how to make you shut up. They can attack your person, your personhood, or your personality, or your looks. You know what I mean? They could threaten your family, right? They could threaten you. There's a lot of angles that someone can go to shut you up. But if you think about it and you say, well, if that's their goal, if their number one goal is to really shut me up, because that's what I think it is, why would I give them that? In my mind, why would I give you what you want? Like, you are an asshole to me. Like, I'm not going to give you what you want. Like, if anything, you're going to push me harder. And someone said it really well, whether you like him or not, he's very controversial in the vegan community, Vegan Gains. He talked about how he deals with hate so well. He said, it fuels me every single time. It fuels me to say, I'm going to prove you wrong. It fuels me to look at all the research to find every single way to prove that you are wrong in any way possible. And so it motivates him to do that. And I mean, you could see it in his videos, if you know that style.
It's funny that I actually, when I started getting hate, I literally went to his channel to see how because he deals with it so well, and he is like, so I have copied and pasted some of his literature and some of his backing, because I mean, no one can support someone 100%, but I'm a big fan of like I like Vegan Gains, and so I have thought his way of handling things for years has been really, really great and professional.
Yeah, and I think you could take something else from him. He's very smart with the way he grows. So he puts himself out there. He puts himself totally out there to be humiliated by anybody he wants. He doesn't care who you are. He doesn't care. But he wants you to be very big. He wants the biggest name, the biggest anti-vegan names that he could possibly get, and he'll go for it. And that takes guts. It takes guts to do a live interview against someone that absolutely hates you and wants the totally opposite from you, and you have to sit across and try and convince the audience, you know what I mean, of like which one's the right way for them to decide, which is just fascinating. It's kind of like the people that do some of the other courageous things, like whether it's going in to rescue an animal instead of a slaughterhouse, you know, directly and risking arrest or being arrested. And you know, to me, it's not the same kind of risk level, but the same kind of courage that it takes. I think it's the same kind of courage.
That's been once I started reading a lot of activism literature, actually, just on like the idea of what that means during this lockdown time. I started completely kind of almost calling myself out, because activism in like the root etymology and what it invokes tends to do with policy change. And so that really was a wake-up call of like, it's not that me sharing doesn't do anything, because I have now hundreds of people that have said, actually, like, just through my TikTok alone, like I literally did not know like what this meant. And now I'm transitioning and things like that, where there needs to be all different approaches, but waking up to the fact that like, if I want to change policy, I want to engage in actual physical acts like that, really has made me, my hope was to be able to do that by my birthday in August. I thought maybe the world would be reopened by then. I now have no expectation for certain timing, but I think that once you like start not holding yourself back, that's a precedent that you keep up. And so the next step for me is now that I've tackled the online, like I just have it all out. Like it's literally me. Like I am just very, very open about veganism, and I don't pull back or sugarcoat. I think that deters from the seriousness of the movement. And
it muddles down the message. I think it muddles down the message too.
Exactly. I'm very utilitarian with the way that I live my life. So I think always what will minimize harm and maximize healing, or maximize like overall life. And every moment that I know that I'm sugarcoating or saying or take it little by little, no. Like that's not helping. That's not minimize. That is not minimizing harm. And so that's what empowers me, is knowing like, oh, if I weigh this out, I'm not going to take that choice. And that has been my next goal, like you mentioned with the in-person activism, is to do that. And I don't know if there's actually much of that here in New York, because it's at least in New York City. But I wanted to travel too. So yeah.
I don't know 100%, but I can almost
Yeah.
guarantee you can find something in New York,
Yeah.
because obviously they're an incredibly progressive city,
Yeah.
relatively, compared to the ones that aren't. and
Right.
I mean, like LA and everything, right? And so, but have you heard of the Vegan Justice League?
I have.
Yeah.
I've done things such as the Animal Rights March for the past few years and the Anonymous for the Voiceless events. But I believe that they're correlated with that, but I could be wrong.
They're actually focused specifically on what you're talking about, policy change.
Oh, okay.
Like
Okay.
100%. That's all they taught. That's their whole focus. And I did a podcast with the owner, or the founder. Her name is Connie Spence,
Ooh,
and she's absolutely amazing. And
yeah.
so she goes by Vegan Batgirl, because originally she was doing activism in LA, is kind of how she became kind of popular. And she got this huge light, like the Batman light, and would put that light onto buildings and have messages, like animal rights messages. She also did some Black Lives Matters messaging recently. She brought it back, and she's just a super cool person, but all about policy change, all about getting within Congress, essentially, you know what I mean? And getting, changing policies right from there, because you're absolutely right. That's really the next step that we all gotta gravitate towards. I totally agree.
Yeah.
Because if our goal is really animal liberation and all that sort of stuff, there are so many policies in place that'll make that never happen. She talks about is everyone could go vegan and it wouldn't matter, because there's still policies in place that are still bailing out farmers. There's still policies in place that are giving them money for their wasted product. There's still all these things that are protecting them, and they were implemented in the 1930s because of the last depression, and they didn't change because it made sense. It was to protect us from starving, because that was almost what happened. So they said, whatever happens, at least we won't starve. And so that's the reason why the policy. But over time, it's changed so much, and no one's gone against them, because everybody is in agreement with eating meat. So why would they want anything to change? So it's a very tough one now at this particular to make that change.
Yeah, what was phenomenally, I guess I'm not someone that focuses on what aggravates me. I use it to focus on what I use that to fuel me. I don't focus on it. I transform that energy. But recently with the pandemic and the outbreaks in the slaughterhouses and meat packing plants, and the people not understanding that, just the issue being on obviously it's an issue with workers and crowding, but not tying it back to the fact that this all began because of animal agriculture was just absolutely insane. That was been recently what's further fueled me to be I would love to keep my studies up so that I can so that I think that the older I get, the more seriously the things I'm interested in will be taken. And therefore, it's not as if I have plans to do straight politics, but I would love to influence policy and whatnot. And I love people like Cory Booker and who are actually working on this. And that's also with the agricultural subsidy side and the inherent nutritional side that further backs that. It all ties back to money. And what I've learned recently in doing a lot of anti-racist literature research and whatnot has been awareness of more and more it's not a personal thing, it's a systemic power play thing. And so we have to undermine the power dynamics behind it that are inherent in speciesism, which are that's why when people ask me, do you hate me because I eat animals? I'm I'm not even literally paying attention to you. I'm looking at a wider scale. I'm not even looking at you. You're not my concern. So that, changing policy, I think that will be the next thing that's necessary, and hopefully with some of the policies that are being introduced, that does change.
Sometimes, for example, let's say someone that doesn't know much about politics or much about animals or whatever, or not animals, but much about that whole world. What they're doing right now, let's say Vegan Justice League, for example, is they're working on getting a lobbyist, right? In the Congress, right? So their donations, their money are going to pay lobbyist salaries. Those salaries are $100,000 a year. Okay. Yeah. And so what happens is that the people within the industry, the meat industry, they have all the money. They have all the money to get the lobbyists, because that's legal. It is not illegal. When a policy comes out, you have every right to fight against it. You have every right to say why you don't like it. You have all those rights. What's happening is there's not enough people doing that, and there's not enough qualified people doing that. And so if you can either, in my opinion, I mean, I think there's many options, but there's two kind of simple options. You could, one, either just go right into it, like, and just literally go be a lobbyist or something like that, or work in the Congress, right? Or you can donate directly to it, right? Which is that money's going right to it. And if every single vegan or whatever did $5 or something a month, that would get like a bunch of, like a whole lot of work done that would be very surprising.
That's what I think it can be kind of tempting to think that people who only donate like aren't as invested, but it's less about it's less about the personal action of it and more about the actual impact, because that's been mostly what I've been doing. Is once I started suddenly blowing up, I had more disposable income. So I immediately actually threw it into investing in plant-based businesses, because I think stocks are really cool. And so that was really exciting for me, like telling my dad and like his financial advisor, like friends, that like I'm investing in Beyond Meat and stuff. And they're like, that's cool. But that being I've actually felt like the best about that. I'm making the biggest impact with that, because that can scale, and your activism is important in a physical sense, but the widespread scale of like where you allocate your resources, that's what I think is the future. That once the industries are literally defunded and we can see the dairy industry is literally bankrupting, it'll be very different.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get this podcast really going. So tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, so I live in New York. I am from Houston, but I live in New York. I came here to go to NYU, and that was always the plan pretty much since I was very young. I had a dream to go to NYU and live in New York, so I was like aware of that being where I felt at home. I never felt at home in Houston. I went vegan in Houston when I was a teenager, because I grew up asking a lot of questions, and that led me to become vegetarian pretty early on. And that was like the progression of logic, that just made sense at the time. And growing up with a Holocaust survivor grandmother, I also was just more open to like atrocity than the average person. Like I could see what the other people couldn't necessarily. And so I saw that happening to animals, but I didn't realize the whole industry of it. And so once I had a teacher who was vegan when I was in high school, I looked up the word, I watched Gary Yourofsky, best vegan speech you'll ever hear. And that was also when I began studying ethics, and it all just massively, it was this big concoction of logic. That's what I like to think of it, that it's not this like pie in the sky, love and light. Like I love animals like any other living being. I'm not a big touchy-feely pet person. That when I go to animal shelters, I let the kids take the pictures. I admire. I like it's you know what I mean? It's not this concept of like hippy dippiness or entitlement that I think comes with veganism is so strange, because for me it was very clear cut once I got evidence. And I then moved to New York to do acting initially. That was the plan. And then immediately when I got here, I became even more interested in what really lit me up, which was not just like getting applause for being on screen, but rather seeing the bigger truth beyond things. And so I switched to studying philosophy, and I recently graduated from NYU. And particularly I'm interested in cosmology and ethics and consciousness. And I do astrology full time while I start my my graduate degrees in the fall, so that I am still a student, but I'm still, talking about the cosmos too.
That's awesome. So that's great. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about your vegan journey and what led you to that, and some of the things that really led you there, because I find it really fascinating when I heard your story, and I think people really like that.
So I grew up in the very average American family that the food was not particularly nutritious. It was a lot of the standard American diet, and it wasn't a second thought. That I grew up in a divorced household, so my mom did cook in her house, but it did tend to be mostly really unhealthy she claimed that we were Italian, so she cooked a lot of Italian food. I did a DNA test because I was suspicious because I have such naturally like light features. I have no Italian in me. I am all German and Polish, just complete nothing. Like, so basically I grew up thinking I was like trying to be authentically myself by eating this food that I hated. I didn't ever like dairy. So like, and I even would describe it as not even being a taste thing. I would tell people like, I cannot eat this. And everyone thought I was crazy, like crazy, but that was a theme that growing up, I didn't like anything dairy. Even like I didn't even like ice creams for the most part. It just something in me really didn't like it. And I began to ask questions as I got older. And especially I remember asking my mom, why is there like a dog beneath my feet and a pig on my plate? And her getting very, very upset at that, not even addressing it, just she was a pretty violent and like alcoholic person. So my concern was always like, when can I eat to avoid her and how can I make my own food? So my thoughts around food were already, I guess, more mature than the average person because most people grow up thinking like, I'm hungry, where food? Like it's not even, it's archaic. That's the way I think about it, is that it's not them choosing to be cruel. It's like this archaic, just like reach and grab. And it takes a bit of, I guess, like shit shaking you up to maybe think twice about it. And for me, that was just my upbringing. Was I was already aware of, one, I didn't like the food my mom was making, and two, I needed to eat myself. And I really early on knew that the junk food didn't make me feel well. I knew that what I was eating at my school, which was like healthier because I went to just a ridiculous like Christian school that had pretty like I could eat the vegetables there and it was fine, that I enjoyed that more. And at my dad's house, similarly, even though he was always had food available, it was always ordering in Domino's. And my standard order was a full medium-sized pizza when I was like 6, plus a full box of Cinna Sticks. And just knowing that like I would eat that like 3-4 times a week. And I then, as I approached 13, 14, I started to say like literally I can't justify this because I was already like reading some of the literature. I didn't find it compelling to read like Men's Health. I found there to be a pretty clear like there is evidence based, and I don't need to be a scientist to be able to tell that I can read the conclusions and be like, okay, like I don't need to eat this. And even then, my doctors were like, yeah, you don't. Like I actually somehow they were like cool with it. And then when I was 16, after being basically vegan minus baked goods that might have had things in them because I didn't like dairy, I didn't ever eat eggs. Like I just didn't grow up actually in a house that tended to have eggs, so I didn't really eat them. Besides mindless food, I was vegan. And so when I had a teacher that said he was vegan, I was like, oh yeah, me too, thinking, oh, I don't know what that word means, but it's close enough to me. And I was able to keep the conversation. And then I looked it up and I immediately found Gary Yourofsky's speech. And he to this day is like probably my biggest vegan inspiration just based on the way he delivers things and his eloquence with it. And that night it was just like bombardment of, even though I was already so far on the path, I hadn't made the ethical connection. And so everything compiled into one. And that's when I was already so at that point, it's not that I was bullied or like mistreated for being weird, but I was already weird. So I had no social capital to lose. Like I was not going to be this like standard popular girl who was going to go vegan and be ostracized. It was me. People were like, okay, cool. She's vegan now, whatever. And at the same time, my best friend, she was inspired by me. She went vegan. We're still vegan to this day, like 5.5 years later. And instead of, even though I did grow up in Houston, it's a pretty liberal city, so I never had a single issue. I have not ever been in a single circumstance in all of my years on any school trips where there have not been beans, rice, potatoes, vegetables, and I have not been able to have a full meal. And that's why I just have been committed to this without issue, without any hiccups, literally no issues, because I've been eating in abundance, never gone on a crazy fad diet. I saw freely, and that shit show was drama and fun. I never got like swept up into any weird caveat, and I'm still here doing so well. And now I'm looking to, not that I'm older, because it would have been pretty difficult, you know, as like a 15-year-old or whatever, to do the in-person activism. Now I'm ready to move into actually being more of a leadership position because I have like the lifestyle pretty down.
Yeah, absolutely. For sure. That's so great. I like that story. And I think it's unique to a lot of people because most people are like how you described. And like I was like a typical American, like eating burgers and hot dogs and junk food.
Yeah,
I was like, eat any kind of food. It didn't really matter. Like no
yeah,
questions asked. Like, is it edible? Okay, I'll eat it. And I lived in Houston for 3 years.
yeah,
And actually, Houston is where I really damaged my health because I ate so much junk food all the time, and I gained
yeah,
like 50 pounds plus, and I was drinking a lot of alcohol, and so it was not good at all,
yeah,
all the way around. And work was beyond stressful at the time, and I got I don't know exactly, but within that time I manifested an autoimmune disease, and that autoimmune disease led me into veganism, into figuring out
yes,
how the F do I fix this thing? Because I was dying quite literally from the medication they were giving me because it weakened my immune system intentionally, not unintentionally. That was the design purpose of the drug. And so, like, I'm not saying on my deathbed, but I felt deathly sick, like I've never been, from like a cold or a flu or something. And I haven't been sick once. And for me, it's 2.5 years.
yeah.
And
I literally,
so,
yeah, I haven't been ill like literally like ever. And I live in New York. Like I was like my yeah, there's nothing when you're not eating disease, your body can fight off that stuff. Yeah.
yeah, 100%. So, I want to talk about your activism journey as well, and I know that you're growing into it. But I want you to tell me some of the things that you're doing that you believe works really well for speaking up for animals.
Yeah. My apologies. I just unplugged my light. I find that being direct and not sugarcoating is kind of my policy in life. And so I think that there's no reason to I think that just remembering that there are animals that you're working for, and that I don't like to use the word fighting for. I think living for and like working for is a bit more life enhancing, but I think that my activism has always been just like straight facts. That's just I just don't sugarcoat, and I keep it simple. I just deliver the information, and I think that that helps. Similar to Earthling Ed, he's kind of my like activist role model, which is rare that I have role models, but I find him to be quite literally one of the like just most amazing people in the world. And he's so grounded because he doesn't do anything but share the logic and the facts, and he doesn't squander his ground. He doesn't try to step down. He doesn't try to meet the other person where they're at. He asks a lot of questions. And if there's anything I've learned through my education, it's been that when we want to uncover the truth or the reasoning, just asking questions. And that hasn't been something I've ever had an issue with in life, is I've been curious. So in my activism, I think it's important for us to lay facts and then ask questions around why the other person is acting out of alignment with that information. And yeah.
Yeah, a really good question. That's just like kind of like a simple one, that he does, and some other strong activists is, and it just sounds so basic, but it really helps you understand where the person is coming from that you're talking to. So it can go something along the lines of like, what is stopping you right now from going vegan? Like, what are you
Yeah.
afraid of? What's stopping you
Right.
right now? Because then you cut to the bullshit. You cut all this. What about animals? What about Africa? What about over there? What about that country? What about that person? Ooh, I heard this story. Stop that for a minute. You, the person I'm talking to, only.
Yeah.
Like nobody else ever. Right? I even said the other day, I was like, someone was talking about Africa or whatever. I was like, or whatever they were talking about, some other country, and I was like, hold on a minute. I said, Africa's not in this chat right now. I was like, it's just me and you. I was like, it's just me and you.
I,
But anyways, once you ask that question, then they'll open up and they'll say, you know what I'm afraid of? I don't think I'm going to get enough iron. I just don't think I can get enough iron. Great. Let's talk about it. You know what scares me is I just can't give up cheese. Great. Let's talk about it. So like, once you get to like what scares them, like then you can have really the conversation starts, in my opinion.
right. I agree that a lot of the rebuttals are rather like skating around the bush and hoping for a cop out, where if like the weird hypotheticals, and I bring up really often that it's similar to like in humans, we can say that murder is wrong without having an asterisk of in terms of self-defense and in terms of being like cornered. Like we don't need to put an asterisk to a vastly applicable generalization of not needing to inflict harm. And so that's what I kind of like to remind. That's what I similarly do, is that let's pull it back to you right here, right now, because like what's stopping you from literally like saving money by buying the beans? Like what is like literally what is stopping you right now? And often it's just the tradition or the culture or the infiltration, and asking those questions leads them to have to interrogate their own values.
Yeah, and when they say the answer, like, you know what I mean, when they say it themselves, it's so much more powerful than telling them the answer. It just, people like to listen to themselves. They just do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so when they say it, you know, out loud, like oftentimes they'll say, man, that, whatever they say, like if I post something that's maybe a little bit graphic, you know, and they're like, oh, I don't think I can eat meat anymore. You know what I mean? Like, you said that, you know what I mean? Like, that's now in your mind frame, you know, and that's to me, that's a seed. That right there is a seed. Because whether they do it or not, that I know a seed's been planted in that moment.
Right. That was what was so amazing about me actually having a video blow up around the dairy industry in a really positive way, like over 300,000 views now in a few days, and like 50, like really good, like most of the people are liking the video, and having people in the comments, there are a few people that, you know, say things like, okay, so who's eating cheese after this, who probably have not even watched the video, because it would be difficult to comment that when I talk about like just the sexual perversion of it all, and they wouldn't be commenting that if they'd actually watched it. And I with that blowing up, it really showed me what people, because I hadn't had a reach to fully understand people's reaction when it clicks. And for them, it was a lot of, oh my gosh, there was so many comments around, like you could tell that they just made that connection, and that no one is, I mean, for most people, milk might as well be water, that it just comes out of nowhere. And so there's no thought behind it. And so once you explain it, seeing people come to that realization is that reminder that education and information is the way to unwind this like literal insanity.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me some of the specific places where you might be speaking up for animals that people could find you, reach out to you, connect with you.
So on my, most of my content towards veganism is on TikTok. Most of it is responding to comments that I find are an easy entryway, because I don't know, my content isn't necessarily as like jokey, skitty. Like I don't really do like that kind of thing, and that doesn't even really work well for activist causes, because I think it tends to dumb it down. I think actually PETA does a good job with some of it, but most of my activism is through there. And I also post a lot on my Instagram and YouTube for vegan recipes and cooking, because I'm really passionate about just the lifestyle side of it, and I share that every single day. It's rare that I don't share a recipe and or a piece of activism every day, just like some kind of little truth to trigger whoever needs that. And those are the two platforms that I talk about it on all of my platforms, but Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok are where you can find definitive resources from me, and you can find me once the world is lifted up. You'll be able to find me physically at these things. I really want to go to Toronto Pig Save eventually, so that would be like an easy flight, and I would love to do that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think it's important to remember that there are so many different types and styles of activists.
Right.
And I always believe, I think it's very easy to say, this one's more effective than that one, and this one's less effective. That's really easy to say, and for people to say, not to prove, like it's hard to prove, but it's really easy to say. But what I find more important than that, than what's more effective in this moment, in my opinion, is being active, period. Period. And doing what you enjoy. Sometimes I talk to people, they're like, oh, I don't know if I could do what you do. Oh, I don't know if I can do it like that. I don't know. Don't do it like me. Don't even do anything like me. Do what you like, and do what you enjoy, and do what you're comfortable with. If you're talking about it, you're speaking about it, you know, even the funny skit stuff. I didn't really, I did a little bit of funny skits before TikTok, a little bit, but I do more funny skits now on TikTok because it's becoming effective, because it is working. I'm seeing people that are, I'll send sometimes, not all the time, because I have ones like yours where I'm talking really directly to them and into the camera and being very specific. But there's also the funny ones, and what I notice with the funny ones is they come to the comments, and that's when the conversation starts. So it's more of like a, kind of teaser kind of thing, like, oh, maybe he's nice and doesn't know what he's talking about. Like, boom, no, like I know what the hell I'm talking about. It just seems like I'm being silly. Yeah.
With my dairy industry video, I had a lot of people coming to the comments and saying, I thought I was going to be seeing a terrible comment section. I thought I was going to be seeing hundreds of people saying like, I don't care. And I didn't. And I'm actually really, I'm glad that it reinforces that this isn't something to turn away from, that I agree that the comments on those really do get the conversation and that you can use the videos to your advantage. I think that when I said that the skits were mostly just like my forte, because I'm like a drier person. So when I do make them, they tend to be more, even just like more direct, even with my like audio that I use. That's why I said PETA does a good job, because they have fun people. But I agree that we need, like, literally, there's so many different blocks up for people that we need all activism to like be getting in and everything. And there's no better or worse. They're simply different. And whether or not you're like in the trenches, like if you're spreading that energy, you're spreading that energy. So yeah.
There's also something funny that like I saw someone doing that's really well. I think they have like 90,000 followers right now. I interviewed them as well on TikTok, and they do mostly funny stuff and recipes. Yeah. Maybe you've seen her, Angie Kibera, maybe. She does a lot of funny stuff and great recipes. Anyway, she does a really good job at, and I took this from her. It was really smart. She does a good job of kind of breaking down, because she's a new vegan, so she still kind of connects with how she was before. So she's a lot closer to it than some of us that are a little bit further from it. And I think that's important. Yeah. I think there's value with new vegans and sharing what they think and what they believe and how they see things. I think there's real value in that. Yeah. And so what she did is she will take things that are like common things that people will say that they make fun of them, vegans, like vegans eat grass or, whatever it is. And she will literally eat grass in her video. You know what I mean? But like, it's so funny because it's like, obviously she doesn't eat grass. She just made like a bacon recipe, you know what I mean? Like a previous video, And so I started incorporating a little bit of that, because you know what? They can't make fun of you if you already made fun of yourself. You know what I mean? Like it's a little bit harder. So anyways, that's just a little thing. That's not like my whole thing, but that's one of the things I added. I like learning from others and saying, I can incorporate that. I can use a little bit of that. Also, I love testing and trying new things. So if something works, if something works for someone else, and I think it could work as well, like to me, if that makes one person go vegan because of one thing I got from someone else, that's worth it 100%. Like hands down.
Yeah, that's what worked for me with, I wouldn't say I've ever been an angry person, but like with some of the comments, like I was just much more energized. But with the dairy industry one, I literally was like, I have to explain so much background. I'm going to sit down, I'm going to lay it out calmly. And I invoked my inner earthling Ed. And that's what reached people, is instead of like immediately like being like, me being like, hey, this is actually a common sentiment that people don't understand. And that is what blew up. And so from that point forward, that's been the basis of making sure that I'm grounded. And that often means not responding in the moment, but it's been like a meditative practice of understanding, being grounded so that it doesn't fuel that cycle of back and forth. And that has been what's worked for me, has been the calmness to where people are already intrigued by approaching me.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, there are times where I am reading the comments and I get really impressed by the responses with some people, like some of the creators, and I'm like, dang, that's a really good way to put it. Awesome job. And it gives me a different feeling of that person, that person really gets it and really understands. And I find that those people are oftentimes they're also growing faster, because of the level of understanding that they have. Yeah. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
All right. So as we wrap this up, it looks like we have like 7 minutes or so. Is there anything that maybe you want to add, or is there anything that you really want to reiterate so people don't forget from this podcast?
Yeah, I'd say that in everything that I'm interested in, as far as anything that I'm creatively, I think even though I'm not necessarily like a painter, an artist in that sense, I do consider like a lot of what I do just creative. Like everything I do is self, I am the one like creating those things. I'm not really ascribing to an external system. And a lot of it stems from wanting to get to the bottom of things, because of it seeming like there's a lot covering up. And whether that is with astrology and realizing that there was so much more to it, and that I don't know exactly how we can have such a synchronistic universe, but that it really does reveal so much to it that I'm interested in that. And with veganism, like I said, it being a path of logic and sense, that I would just encourage anyone listening to examine just even the micro decisions and the small things in their life, to take a meditative stance and ask yourself why you're doing things and if it literally makes sense, because often we're caught up in thousands of years of cultural inertia or just regurgitating what we saw as a few years old. And just a bit of presence in our own lives can make all the difference, and that it feels much, I don't think that ignorance is bliss. I think it's a sedative, and it feels much greater to actually work through the shock of reality and accumulate and assimilate into feeling great in awareness, and that's actually where power lies.
I love that. And I've never heard that ignorance is a sedative, but that
I didn't either until I just said that.
All right, we'll put that on a quote, and it'll be yours. All right. All right. Well, I had a great time talking to you. And thank you so much for this impromptu request for a podcast, because it was a very unique way that I asked for a podcast. But I love speaking to people that are new, that are fascinating. I like learning more about people that I don't know too well. Those are the most exciting podcasts for me, because I always feel like when you meet someone or when you're talking to someone or you learn them, that's not always, but that's usually the most interesting or exciting time, because it's like everything's new and I like new things. And so that's one of the things that I like to do on this podcast, is speaking to people that I find interesting, that I think are having a big influence, that can educate and teach people, because it's almost, this is my school, honestly. Like this, like talking to you or people like you is kind of like, that's my education.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, because similarly, I think that the more that we learn from each other as people who are interested in growing and learning, the more that can exponentially increase. And so I am always really thankful to be able to connect with other vegan kings and queens, and to continue on the message. And I'm excited to see the upcoming episodes from you and go back and listen to the people you mentioned, because that's my jam, is to just hear about people's vegan journeys. So yeah, I appreciate it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. If you want to hear vegan journeys, and hopefully there's people that you know, like if you take a look at the guest list, every episode's a guest. The first episode was by myself explaining what the podcast is going to be about, the theme, the purpose, the goal. All the other ones are with guests or multiple guests. Yeah. All right. Okay. Well, take care. Have a great day, and we'll be having this one up as soon as possible.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye. Thanks for talking.
Thank you guys for listening to the podcast. Please, please, please make sure that you guys share this with anyone that you think will find this interesting. And also make sure that you guys are subscribed, because I can see a lot of you guys are listening, but you aren't subscribed.